though, that these forces are assembling, including the ACT Party here, tells us everything we need to know about who our enemy is. The enemy are the rich. The enemy are the billionaire class. The enemy are the Epstein class. And so it is a very, very real threat. And I think the urgent need for the left and others to mobilize around this is clear. This can't just be left to the Palestinian protesters. To a broad coalition involving everybody from the revolutionary left, socialists, Greens, ecologists, pacifists, Christians, Muslims, really everybody who believes in peace.
Yep. Okay, cool. So, kia ora koutou, and welcome everybody to part 2 of a one-off podcast. I'm here with Joe Carolan, who is the organizer of Stop Wars Aotearoa. We are going to be talking about the upcoming rally on Saturday to the No More Wars rally, which is part of the rallies, which are part of a national day of action throughout Aotearoa, to show our disagreement with the current state of the world, particularly the multi-front war that the US is waging against many, many countries, but predominantly, of course, Iran, and also the Israeli war against Palestine and Lebanon, which of course happens with full US backing. So, kia ora, Joe. How are you today?
Kia ora, Kieran. Good to meet you.
Yeah. So, I believe that this was all your idea originally. Is that true?
We've been attending Palestine protests for the last 2.5 years since the genocide began, and there's quite a number of groups who are there through thick and thin, and socialists, trade unionists, and others have been the backbone within the PSNA. But obviously, this war is now expanding beyond Palestine. Obviously, what they got away with, getting away with genocide, and Western leaders not bringing people to book for genocide, has created the situation where Trump now feels emboldened to use the same tactics on other countries. So we now see a vicious attack on Beirut, a vicious attack on Tehran. I see the synagogue in Tehran was destroyed today, but the template that they used in Gaza, bombing hospitals, bombing schools with school children in them, bombing places of worship. They got away with it for 2.5 years. Our Western leaders did nothing about it. Now we are on the brink of what could be the use of nuclear weapons in a battlefield situation in Iran, with Trump threatening to destroy a whole civilization. This is what happens when leaders do not mobilize or speak out against a deranged lunatic who is now in charge of the United States.
Yes, and as we talk, we are 45 minutes away from Trump's deadline at the moment, and we, by the time people hear this, they will see whether this is just bluster or whether something incredibly awful is coming out of it. So, yeah, you felt that there was this there's a basis of a movement there, clearly, and thought we should go forward with that, I take it?
Yeah, I was essentially involved in the 2003 mobilization against the war in Iraq. February the 15th was involved with the European Social Forum in bringing together 30,000 representatives from trade unions, parties of the left, faith groups in Florence, in Firenze, in the October before what was one of the biggest mobilizations of protesters in human history. In Ireland, we got over 150,000 on the streets at that time. by building a broad anti-war united front, or a broad coalition involving everybody from the revolutionary left, socialists, Greens, ecologists, pacifists, Christians, Muslims, really everybody who believes in peace. We are at that time now. And I think the movement that we've had in solidarity with Palestine internationally has paved the way, just like the movement, which was much smaller, but the movement against the war in Afghanistan paved the way for gigantic mobilizations around Iraq. So that is the challenge to the left. Are we going to talk about this, or is it time for action? Is it time to actually start disrupting the system before the bombs drop? And the bombs won't just be dropping on Iran. If this threat is real, the bombs will be dropping on every city on planet Earth, because once a tactical nuclear weapon is used by the Americans or the Israelis, we are then in the doomsday situation. And the clock has never been as close to midnight as now. The Cuban Missile Crisis shows us how close we came to nuclear holocaust, but at that time you had Kennedy as the president of the United States of America. I don't think, whatever we think of genocidal US presidents, and Kennedy certainly had his hands covered in blood in Vietnam, etc., but you could not compare Trump to any kind of statesperson who is aware of the intricacies of international diplomacy and balance. So it is a very, very real threat. And I think the urgent need for the left and others to mobilize around this is clear. This can't just be left to the Palestinian protesters.
So yes, I agree. So you're building a coalition. I would also say that it's not simply whether an acceleration causes it to become everyone's problem. It already is everyone's problem. And I'm not simply talking about the price of fuel. As with the Iraq War and the previous Gulf War, the carbon emissions, and indeed also the blowing up of the Gulf Stream pipeline, the carbon emission, Nord Stream pipeline, sorry, the carbon emissions from this are affecting everyone. And it also, I think it has to be said that if the forces behind this aren't defeated, if they become more empowered, they are part of a growing, marching force of fascism that we see is coming into all of our countries. So you're building a coalition, and we would hope that people from all sorts of organizations would want to join together in that. Would that be correct?
I think people are making the links between the different issues that different causes are campaigning on. Certainly when it comes to another war for fossil fuel control, we can see that climate change, imperialism, and late stage capitalism are completely linked. The capitalist system is like a heroin addict, addicted to petrol and fuel at all costs, willing to wage genocidal wars to ensure control over oil. Trump is ready to do this in Latin America as well, in Venezuela, and with an attack on Cuba, Latin America is on the brink of mass protest. I mean, groups like Extinction Rebellion, who've been leading direct action protests around the climate crisis and the need to replace the fossil fuel system with clean fuels. I mean, these different issues are all linking together now. And I think that is the potential of this period in history, that sometimes it takes the threat of war, of nuclear war, to deeply radicalize society And this is what we saw in the 60s with the Vietnam War and the movement against it, also inspiring second wave feminism, the civil rights movement, and by the end of the 60s, mass protest and revolutionary situations in many countries.
Yeah, so these times of challenge are times of opportunity too. And I believe that as well, I already see signs of that people who were afraid to talk out, no matter how bad the Palestine genocide got, um, they were they wouldn't speak out. But some people who have said nothing have come out immediately and against the war against Iran. So I think that perhaps a lot of people have been held back by the flack they get for anti-Semitism if they say something about Israel doing something bad. So perhaps this is a turning point for peace movement and the
Well,
kind
Israel
of
just bombed a synagogue in
yeah,
Tehran.
yeah. It says it all. And here we have, we have worked already with Climate Liberation Aotearoa and Save Denniston Plateau and the Sam's Creek people. And we do, like, people do understand that there is a connection between all of these things. Now, part of what I think you're trying to achieve is to get the unions more on side. Is that correct?
Yeah, and some great support already from the CTU president, Sandra Gray, from the Maritime Union of New Zealand, the Wharfies, who have a great history of international solidarity with workers fighting imperialism, refusing to load pig iron, for example, to Japan when they were attacking China in the 1930s, years before the rest of the world joined in that war. And Workers' First Union, who represent most of the essential workers in New Zealand. I mean, unions have always been about international solidarity, both internationally, but also within the workplace themselves, uniting people of different cultures. And so we know that war is trying to divide people into different racial and religious groups to make us enemies of each other. The union movement has been about bringing workers together, but also the power that unions have to shut down the system will be necessary if the politicians completely ignore the movement for peace. And that's the kind of workers you want, the essential workers who are operating the supply lines, the wharfies who operate the ports, airport workers, etc., being a power that we can use. That if our leaders ignore the protests against war, like they did in 2003 with Iraq, that our movement then look at organizing what they did before World War One, organize stoppages and strikes as well. That's not just the paper demand in America after the gigantic protests, the No Kings protests last weekend that saw 8 million people take to the streets, the huge protests in London with 500,000 people against the far right and the war in Iran. It's unions that have been mobilizing tens of thousands of people for peace against war. And yes, against this massive fuel crisis, this massive cost of living crisis we've been suffering since COVID, that is now going to get 50% worse at a time when many workers have very little disposable income and very little security in their jobs. It's time for unions to mobilize and take action.
Well, I think part of the, obviously unions have had at the core of the ethos the principle of solidarity and the idea that an injury to one is an injury to all. And I think it's time that we start to recognize again that that isn't altruism, that is actually self-defense. And there is no limit to solidarity. We are connected to those schoolgirls in Iran who were killed. That's our lives too. And if we ignore them, it's at our own expense. So hopefully we can start, translating that bring back those values from the union movement into a broader coalition and move forward. So we're planning on Saturday. There's rallies and marches happening all around the country. So now, what details can you give us of what's happening?
Well, here in Auckland, we'll be assembling at 2 p.m. At Aotea Square, and then marching on the centre of evil, the US consulate, down at Customs Street. Zionists, the far right, the ACT Party, and the monarchists of Iran, who want to put their God King on a throne, will be assembling at the US consulate, deliberately trying to provoke us. We booked this and notified the police of our march and our intent to rally peacefully at the Aotea Square, where these people originally planned to counter-protest, but then move off to the US consulate to avoid any clash with them. Look, Iranians are a nation of 90 million people, and it would be deeply Orientalist or racist of the West to say that they're all homogenous, that they all have just one political ideology. Not everybody in Iran is a monarchist. Not everybody in Iran is an Islamist. There are many other points of view. Many people are left-wing, many people are feminist, many people are liberal, and that's to be understood. But there has been real intimidation of dissenting Iranian voices by the monarchists who wave Zionist flags, the Israeli flags. They thank their hero, Bibi, Netanyahu, and Trump, and wave pictures of their God Emperor, the Shah's son, right? These people are not representative of broad Iranian society. And indeed, Trump will dispense with the Shah when he's finished using him as his pretext for an oil war, the same way he dispensed with the right winger in Venezuela once he got her Nobel Peace Prize on his mantle. The fact, though, that these forces are assembling, including the ACT Party here, tells us everything we need to know about who our enemy is. The enemy are the rich. The enemy are the billionaire class. The enemy are the Epstein class. And what's his name? We'll know all about his party president, Tim Yago, and the kind of morality that the rich have in this country. So we are looking forward to exercising our democratic rights this weekend in Auckland, and we will not be intimidated by Zionists, monarchists, or the ACT Party. We will be representing broad swathes of New Zealand society, and everyone from the Catholic Church, the Labour Party, the Greens, the Maori Party, the Alliance Party are coming up. I see Victor Billows coming up from Christchurch. But then real muscle for this movement in terms of unions and the organised working class, like MUNS and Workers First. Lots of international solidarity groups as well. People that we've stood shoulder to shoulder, now standing shoulder to shoulder with the people of Iran. People from Myanmar who know all about dictatorship, opposing the war, people from Sudan, from Lebanon, as you mentioned, that is being attacked just as ferociously as Gaza was attacked, and Israel seeking to permanently confiscate southern Lebanon, building a greater Israel project right in front of our eyes, not in theory, right in front of our eyes. People from Syria, Egypt, and Bosnia, people who know what war is, like many of us from the north of Ireland do as well. We know what war is. We know what imperialism is. We don't believe that bombs bring freedom, as the monarchists carry on their signs. So we are looking forward to that. We will mobilize peacefully, but we have contacted police commanders and said that we have a right to protest. We should not be intimidated by these pro-war, pro-violence right-wingers.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, yeah, also, I should add that there are actions happening in Pōneke, Wellington, which starts at 11 a.m. at Civic Square, and here in Ōtautahi, Christchurch, at 1 p.m. at the Bridge of Remembrance. But there may be actions happening elsewhere in the country. Do you know of any? Or I think people maybe just need to keep their eyes open and ears to the ground, check their social media, because people, hopefully, we will have actions in smaller centres as well.
We've been talking to smaller groups of people, particularly around the Palestinian Solidarity Network that has branches in smaller towns. For this first march, the three urban centres, three bigger urban centres, are what we're concentrating on. But future days of action, if we do have future days, would be widespread and nationwide.
So yeah, I mean that's an interesting point. I mean, the world's problems are not going to go away if there's a ceasefire in Iran. And so is this meant to be an enduring coalition, maybe like Stop the Wars in the UK, sort of going forward, something that's because the fact is that they formed that in 2001, was that I think, and it's not like its purpose ever ended. So is that the sort of vision you have for the future with Stop Wars Aotearoa?
Yeah, I know Lindsay and John Rees well, and so I see Chris Nynham and others have been charged with organising Palestine protests in London in the face of a police ban, an undemocratic police ban. So Stop Wars Coalition in Britain has been a great anti-war united front that most of the left have supported over decades now. And yes, it is true that we're going to need some form of permanent coalition. I think that it has to be broad. I mean, I'm a socialist myself. With the belief that we can stop war through general strikes. I've organized strikes, so it's not just an academic point of view. But however, such a broad movement requires, agreement around quite simple things. Stop the war. How we do that remains to be debated. And secondly, for an independent foreign policy. The left is good at outdoing each other with the shopping lists, and I'm sure there are many demands that we could have in an independent foreign policy. The closure of Five Eyes, the closure of the FBI office, rocket labs being stopped from being part of the military-industrial complex, etc., etc. But we're not going to be too prescriptive. Let's have those debates inside the movement together as we mobilize together. So, yeah, if you believe that we need to stop the war and that Aotearoa should have an independent foreign policy and we should not be represented by that drunken old alcoholic buffoon Winston Peters with his tongue so deep up Mario Rubin's behind. This is the kind of, it's time for the boomers to get out of the way, really. They've lost their credibility and they're following the emperor who has no clothes, and they're making a mess of our economy. They're making a mess of our environment. They're making a mess of our world. And the rising is coming to kick them out.
Yes, and it can't come soon enough, especially with Winston Peters certainly having outlived his usefulness to anyone really, apart from perhaps the people who pay him to do their bidding. All right, so is there any last thing you would like to say before we wrap it up?
Just do your bit if you're out there, if you've heard this program and any of this has made sense to you. So start sharing the posts on socials. the hashtag Stop Wars Aotearoa is how we're linking up. There's a Facebook group there and an Insta group there, and digital social media can be useful in occasions like this. So you actually use it to spread the word for this Saturday and beyond, and let's network and get ready together. If you do want to set up a local group in a smaller place in New Zealand, get in touch with us um, at Stop Wars Aotearoa, and we'll help you. We're printing as many posters as we can and as many placards as we can. So we'd appreciate any support that people can give us. We've got badges, T-shirts, and that kind of stuff for smaller groups to help raise funds because, we need resources to fight the rich and fight the powerful. But on our side, what we've got is, they've got the guns, but we've got the numbers, as James Morrison said in 5-1. And pretty soon we'll be taking over. The old order is dying. We are in the interregnum. Monsters are ruling the world, or as Jarvis Cocker went a little bit stronger. But you can see from Trump's tweet that the ruling class isn't what it used to be.
Absolutely.
American imperialism is no longer represented by JFK or the smooth jazz of Obama, or even the country line dancing of George W. Bush, who, beside this guy, nearly looks like an intellectual. This is the end of late capitalism, and we are represented. The world is led by an orange clown and a buffoon. The time has come. If you're waiting for a signal to get involved, here it is.
All right. Well, you heard it here. As I've said before on a different podcast, Trump is the final boss of imperialism. So let's get out and defeat that final monstrosity. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Joe. And it was a great pleasure to talk to you. And
I love your kneecap, teacher.
Cheers. All right. I will catch you later on.
Kia ora.